I'm gonna turn off my camera because I'm eating right now. I'll turn it on when I'm done
Oh,
eating.
it's not
Okay.
serious. So yeah, Mo went away. So just to hello everyone. Just for a small story, right now Mo is covering an event of a gallery week in Valencia. So she might not be able to join. So but we saw her. She's very active, and we don't know if she will come or not. And just one question. Everybody met already, no? You know Ciaran, everyone?
Yes. Pigsy.
Pigsy, yeah. So it's
Okay.
named by his first name, Ciaran.
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 Huron.
Sorry?
Huron.
Ciaran.
Yeah.
Kiran. Kiran.
Oh,
Yes, from
Pigsy.
Irish is hard to.
Kiran. Kiran.
Ciaran.
Yeah,
Huron.
Pigsy.
Where are you? What city are you in, Karen?
I'm in Ajijic in Mexico.
Oh, cool.
For a residency?
I'm at the moment, no, I'm just chilling. But I start a residency in Ajijic in about 2 weeks. And then I'm back to Mexico City in a residency until next year.
But you're originally from Mexico City or from Ireland?
No, I'm from Dublin, Ireland.
Oh, okay.
I'm just wandering at the moment.
Hi.
Cool. Hi.
How are you enjoying Mexico?
Loving it, yeah. We were in Mexico City, then Guadalajara, and now we're in Chapala, Ajijic. It's on Lake Chapala, and it's great. The weather's great. It's like 22, 24 degrees. Today is actually cloudy. Normally it's not. And yeah, it's epic. Yeah, brilliant. There's where we are at the moment.
What state is that? Is it on the eastern?
It's kind of it's on the west coast, but it's really inland. So it's in the middle, really. And it's Jalisco. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a
Nice.
lot of expat Americans here and Canadians. So yeah, it's different to Mexico City.
Okay.
Nice.
And why did you decide to go there?
Just the art scene in Mexico at the moment is pretty thriving. And so I just wanted to check it out. So Ajijic is kind of a bit different. It's a bit more it's kind of more local art, where Mexico City is a bit more kind of contemporary art scene, and the museums in Mexico City are just unbelievable. On every corner, everywhere you go, there's just museums. So the art culture seems to be thriving. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to check it out.
That's cool. Have you guys always been based in Dublin?
Well, we were in Dublin until just as the pandemic hit. Then we went to Malaga in Spain. Then we went back to Dublin, then back to Malaga, then Madrid, now here. So we're kind of we are Irish, like we are Dublin based, but we've been moving around a good bit for the last while. Yeah, just trying to experience some different kind of cultures, seeing how it affects the mental state and the work and things like that, rather than being stuck in the little insular bubble, which is Dublin, Ireland. Even though Dublin, Ireland, extremely, everybody's an artist, some sort of a poet, a writer. It's just unbelievable in Dublin. In Ireland in general, everybody has got some sort of creative outlet. So yeah, it's just nice to get out of that though, because it's fairly competitive.
What's your practice? Are you like 2D based or 3D based?
2D painter, really. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So traveling doesn't really make a big, huge impact.
The biggest impact actually is I like to paint on I find it a lot easier to paint large scale work. So I haven't been able to do that because everything has to fit into a suitcase.
Mhm.
That's the biggest kind of restriction. And then constantly having to set up a studio is kind of expensive because you have to get rid of all your art materials. So you're constantly thinking of that when you have a studio set up and you have, you can kind of buy materials and maybe not use them for a couple of months and then know they're there, but you can't do that when you're moving around. That's so that's you kind of that's the biggest creative block, really.
Yeah.
But everything else is good and healthy for the head.
Does it take you a long time to settle into your new environment?
No, unbelievable. No, I've kind of like it 24 hours and I'm fully set up and ready to
Wow.
rock. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. But then you add to it. But like at the moment, today, like I'm in a kind of house here, so I don't want to wreck the place with paint. So I've just been writing and researching and things like that. So there's always something to do. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
We run a residency in the desert, and it's really interesting because I used to go on residencies, and I'm the kind of artist who I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get to a residency. It's going to give me time, but I'm going to be working on my project. And some of our residents, they're like that. They come, they bring their already started paintings, or they know what they're going to do. But then there's other artists who come and they just walk around for a few days, and then they start building something that they've never done before. They get inspired by something that they're seeing, and they build something that it's a totally new thing for them. And I actually really love that, even though I'm not like that myself. Like, we had somebody a week ago, she came out and we have a bunch of glass everywhere, broken glass in the desert. And she said, I think I want to do a glass mosaic. I've done glass mosaics before. And then the next thing I know, she's doing this weaving with wires that's like almost like a curtain. It's not a mosaic at all. It doesn't have any substrate. And I was so impressed with that. And she was also really excited, because maybe it'll be something that she'll never do again, but maybe it'll be a new part of her practice. So but it's interesting, there's different people react differently to a new situation.
I have a small question about, I saw on your blog that you are changing your address, the residency. There's a change?
No, that's
No.
not the residency. That's the
Okay.
mini golf course. Two different projects. Yeah.
Okay, because you have many projects and
Yeah.
and so I shared all the information about everyone, just a little line, and it could be very interesting for you to go there. It's in California, and you could explain why it is the
Me?
residency. Yeah.
Yeah. We were sort of in the middle of nowhere, and it's the desert, and people get really
Extreme.
shocked, with the weather, because it can be very, very hot or very windy or very cold. Like, our weather is just crazy. But I'm from San Diego, where we have perfect weather all the time. So I'm constantly surprised at the weather. But our place was a dumping ground. Like, a lot of people dump things in the desert, and because it's so dry, nothing rots. And so everything is preserved.
Even
Plastic.
artists.
Yeah. So you're just walking around, and there's really old wood, there's really old metal, we just bought an old milk truck. And so we're making it into a little gallery, as if we needed more space, but it's going to be this little gallery. And so it's an old milk truck.
Check out Anna's space. I went there last year, and she was really kind to receive me and my friends. and we just had a really great time. She took us around the property. I mean, the property, like, it's a really loose word. It's more than just a house. Like, there's the larger desert, and there's no, what I found really funny was that there was no fence. So at night, you know, like, because the desert is completely dark, you can kind of see the city right next to it, but like, you know, certain part of it's completely dark. So I was like, where's the end of this? Like, are we gonna get kidnapped? Like, at somewhere if we go too far? But like at the day, you see everything, and then, you know, there's like a barn. I think that was the barn that you were talking about, Anna. And there's the barn with the rooftop. And at night it looked like kind of scary, and me and my friend were like, oh. But like in the daytime we went in, it was actually really cool. I think Anna invited our artists to do some workshop there, or it was his studio or something.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And there was like a little green, what do you call that? Oasis.
Oasis. Yeah.
Oasis, yeah, like right next to your house. It was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why I like artists coming for our residency to really interact with the landscape, because it is so surprising. But Mexico is the same. Like I went to a residency in Mexico a couple years ago, and it was also really impressive, you know, how beautiful, how lush, you know, the little tiny village that was near the residency. It was on a hacienda. It was, so I'm always impressed with artists who really react to the space and produce something that they normally wouldn't produce. Anyway.
The interesting thing about Hihik is that it is, as you say, Anna, it's very green and lush. It's a bit like Ireland that way. But the next residencies, it's only 2 weeks long, but it's for Dia del Muertes, so the Day of the Dead. So it's very specific to Mexico. So I'm hoping that I can kind of step away from what I'm doing at the moment and do something else. But it is good to. Whereabouts exactly are you, Anna?
Joshua Tree, which is outside of LA. Yeah.
So how far away from LA is it, or?
It's a 2.5 hour drive.
Okay.
Yeah. It's more remote. It's remote. So right in the Mojave Desert. Yeah. So almost between Las Vegas and LA, almost in between there in the center. So.
And have you been based there for many years, or?
No, 6 or 7 years. We bought 7 years ago, and it slowly moved out there. And there's a big artist community, similar to a lot of communities in like Mexico, or, you know, a lot of artists have left LA because there's not enough, the rents are too high, and to have a studio space, you have a tiny little space. And in the desert, especially for sculptors, they can rent a place or even buy a house that has 5 acres like we have. So there's a lot of space.
Yeah.
So that was the reason. But Dia de los Muertos, you're going to love that if you've never experienced it. It's super exciting. It's beautiful. At their folk, you know, the altars that get built. We do it in Southern California too. I love it. It's almost like better than Halloween.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't aware of what it was, so it just seemed it kind of sparked my interest. So
yeah, it's very, very wonderful holiday, and very, you know, the arts that happen around it is really great. Do you guys know about it, Esra? Yeah, it's really nice.
Anna, do you provide supervision to the artists who are coming?
You know, what we do is, so we provide a little place for them to live, and then we show them the different places they can work. You know, you can have a space in the barn, you can have a more cleaner space if you want, or, you know, a lot of artists choose to work outside in the nature. And then I sort of gauge it, like we have somebody coming tomorrow. I've never met her. I don't really know what she's going to do. Some artists want a lot of interaction, and some artists are just like, nope, I'm fine. And I just check in on them. And like, we have dinner together like every 3 days. And I invite them, you want to come to dinner? And other than that, they're cooking their own meals. They're on their own. So it's just, It's just what they want. I sort of, but I do ask them about their work. I feel like I'm coaching a little bit if they want it. Hold on just 1 second. I think somebody got locked out. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so yeah, makes me think about the Day of the Dead is also very connected to the spirits. So for you it's very interesting. I think it can be very good for your art practice. Yeah. So just the usual question I will ask every time is do you have something like a project, something about the groups you want to propose to someone else, or some community aspect, or some subject you want to put on the table that we discuss about, or anything? Do you have something in mind you would want to propose to talk about?
Well, the first question I'd ask is
Esra.
Esra, yeah, are you working on anything specific at the moment? Same question to Taaye.
You know each other, huh?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
met. You
the
weren't there,
architect.
but
You
yeah,
have
our
two
architect.
together. You have architectural practice.
Yeah, exactly. We spoke of it. No, unfortunately, I'm full-time in the office. I do big projects, like public projects, as an architect. And lately, like last 2 years of my life, I am dealing with so many struggles with residence permits. So I have like very limited time left. But before that, I was having like 2 different practices. One was more about semiology, semiologic studies on letters and alphabets, and some mapifications. Like lately I was working on that too. I wouldn't call it project, but type of practices, both kind of linked to location and identity that I kind of like struggle a lot to explain, like where are you from, like which language you speak, and then it doesn't matter, and I don't even attached with my identities that much, but I end up defending random places, random people. So it's kind of ironic, but maybe visually it doesn't look ironic. I have a bit more like, we follow each other in Instagram. I have a bit clean architectonic aesthetic. Yeah, but lately a bit everything is a bit standby. Indeed, like as soon as I get this residency problems, I want to do some artist residency outside of Italy and to have a bit of fresh mind.
Yeah.
And I would love to maybe I can ask you like how you prefer in your residencies. Do you need that so many interaction and supervision, or like preferably some other artist around, or you are more isolated? Yeah.
And each one is kind of different, which is great. So the next ones are very community based, which is going to be good, because it means I have to not be so isolated, because I normally like to work by myself, really. Yeah, so it's doesn't really matter, Esra. But I think it's good to have a mix, personally. So it kind of challenges you a bit. Like the one with Greg was very challenging, because it was kind of, you're living in the space, and there's no switch. You can't really switch off from it. At least, you know, in Dublin when I had the studio, or in Malaga or whatever like that, you're having to leave your apartment to go to it. So there's a switch off, even the walk to it or the cycle to the studio. get your mind thinking. It's kind of like preparation, where when you're constantly switched on, it's you know, you're really poking at your psyche a lot.
So you are very flexible, as I understand. Like you don't complain that much.
No, don't care. Anything. I just think that creativity comes from anywhere. So the more you experience, for me, the more you experience, the more you can kind of get inspired by anything, by you know, walking down a cobbled street, or you know, somebody shouting at somebody on the street, or being in isolation. You might think of something, meditating. I just think it comes from anywhere. Yeah, so.
Actually, Pigsy was doing a really interesting thing as part of the residency in Madrid with Very Private Gallery. I'm just prompted by the fact when he said about meditation, he made well, actually, he can probably describe it better, but he made a room with that removed all
the light.
All the light. It was a dark room, and then he played just some kind of sounds. So the concept was
so it was actually like, there's a couple of rooms. I don't know if you know Greg's place in Madrid, but so one of the bathrooms I blacked out, so I kind of tried to remove all the senses, and I'd go in and I'd do a transcendental meditation for about 20 minutes, and then I'd put on some meditative music and blindfold myself, remove all the senses, and then search for the paint materials and do black, you know, like, and let the emotions come out and see what beasts or whatever are coming out. So it's quite interesting. Some of the paintings are very messy. Some of them are actually clearer than you'd imagine. So I call them black room paintings, but yeah, it's pretty cool. So at least in Madrid, you had the space to do that. In some other places, you don't, you know. So like in Malaga, I'm on the street. So people are walking past. It's like a shop unit. So people are walking past, or in a coffee shop across the way. So you're on show. So they're different. But you get inspired by that because you can hear sounds of the street, and you can kind of see people, you know, maybe having an argument, people kissing, you know, people having discussions. They spark different kind of creative instincts.
That's very interesting. I like the way, like how you take some very site-specific aspect of the space and you reflect on a very personal and intimate way.
A friend of mine, Paul Hughes, does that kind of site-specific art, where he looks for coordinates of locations, and then, because he's a landscape kind of abstract painter, he does that. And there's another guy that comes to my mind, another Irish guy called Paddy Graham, who it's all about location. And he wasn't very well known. He's very old now, and then you know, he's become more recognized now. But you might find him very interesting, Ezra.
What's his name? Could you write?
Patrick Graham. He's Irish, so he paints about location, but he's one of my favorites. It's quite spiritual, and there's a lot of religious symbolism in it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can. You found it, Esra? Or
I'm not sure if I
can
find the
on
right.
Zoom, on Zoom you
well,
can write, or
yeah,
or you
Yeah,
can
could you write in the chat, please?
or you just spell it. Otherwise,
yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, well, you guys can.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're talking about is like, how do you maintain inspiration, you know, like through your life as an artist? I mean, me being the oldest one here, I think like you have certain periods of your life where you, like Esra, she's busy living and she can't make a lot of work. But then you have other periods, like probably you know, Esra, you've had periods where you've been much more involved in your work, but you can't be hard on yourself, because there's times when you have to veer away from your work. Like having had children, I know that that's part of the, you know, when you're raising little babies, you can't make that much work. And there's times when I don't make a lot of product. I don't make objects that much. I'm doing something different now, like I have a residency or I'm doing development. But it's like, as a whole, you see your life sort of moving, you know, and you can't be hard on yourself when you're not feeling really inspired.
Oh,
I don't
that's
know.
so sweet. No, also, beside that, beside just like input, output, my very personal relationship with art is not just about producing art, like also being inside the community, building that. That's why I care this meeting, or just absorbing art, thinking about art. There are like multiple actions than just sitting, drawing and painting.
We have a big exhibit. Oh, sorry, Greg, go ahead.
No, go. After.
We have a big exhibit in that whole LA, Southern California area right now. It's sponsored by the Getty. It's called Pacific Standard Time. And this year, the theme is art and science. So they have exhibitions all over Southern California, which are combining the two kinds of things. And my partner has a practice in which he's very much involved with medicine and art together. And he did a talk, a panel discussion with a curator who had done an exhibition at the San Diego Museum of Contemporary Art. And he works for UCLA, the Keck School of Medicine. And it was really interesting listening to the panel discussion, because one was very academic, you know, very dry. The language was very much art speak. And then my partner, he does curation, in which he is showing artists who have very serious medical conditions, and they make work about their medical conditions. So for example, he just put up a show of artists who have multiple sclerosis. And the idea is to both, yes, support the artists, but also to help educate medical professionals, especially doctors, on how the art can explain the symptoms that people really live. How do people feel when they have MS? But anyway, the panel was so interesting because there was this very academic talk about artists with illness. And then there was this very concrete, because my partner is not an academic. And he was like, well, this is how we explain it to doctors, you know? And it was so interesting. And then there was this very bizarre thing where after this panel discussion, which was at the Beverly Hills Hotel, which is like super fancy, and then we go up to the Getty, which is a huge museum on the top of a hill in Santa Monica. And it's so fancy, and it's all, I was like, where am I? It was so interesting, like how art touches all these lives. But sometimes it's very removed from reality. It's very elitist. It's very, you know, not for normal people. And then like my partner's project is so grounded in reality and really helping people. So, I mean, that's sort of been on my mind. Like, how does art interact with real life in a way that's accessible, I guess, accessible. That's, yeah.
Could you tell his name? So
Oh,
because
my partner's name is Ted Meyer. I can write it.
because most of us know about him, I think, because we already talked about him. But I
Yeah.
think
Yeah, we watch.
Ciaran doesn't know. Ciaran doesn't know.
Yeah.
We had I think I remember I watched one of his speech on YouTube.
made
Maybe
a
we
TED.
shared here TED Talk.
Yeah,
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, he did a TED Talk. He's done a couple TED Talks.
Yeah.
But it was just so interesting. Like when we walked into the panel, I recognized the curator who was moderating, and it was this Ulrich Obrist. Do you know? He's a Swiss curator. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's really famous, you know. He's like a high level curator. But it was very refreshing that TED was my TED was just speaking so plainly about art. You know, I'm sort of over the whole elitist thing that happens with art. It drives me crazy. So that's what's been on my mind.
So true. Art is not just elitist, but it's also very ableist and ageist.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
so true.
Yeah, that's the thing is that's my prime reason, and that's my prime also maybe fight a struggle when with a residency when I talk to artists is so there's individuality and individualism, and and there was someone in the community left the community recently, and you help people. The idea is you try to help people, but then most of the artists, they are so self-inflated that they just take, and then there's nothing back, and they don't really care about the community. And I would say it's not artists, it's most of the people today, because we live the different the society or it is. It's the artists, they have a way to they are mastering visual language, so they have a huge impact on the society. They can have a huge impact on the society, and yeah, Ciaran and Enid, we talked about that. But then, because the society put them alone, and there are competition in between each other, most of them, they are just, I would say, they are just moving hot air. They're just making like diversion. That in Spanish you have I think it's from the Latin. You have you know, in English you have diversion. It's a term of war, like you attract the attention somewhere, and then things are going on for real. That's a war strategy. But then entertainment in Spanish from the Latin is the same word, is diversion. So when you entertain people, and you are, because you are subversive, or you are bringing you're raising awareness, like that, like you try to help people, and you do something with a big curator, and these people, they are implicated with money laundering and things like that are real, okay, and then you are alone, and it's a bit like a clown, I would say. It's nothing against Ted, but because I think he helps people. But I have this problem in art is you are one separated. You try to do your things on your side, and in fact, you are maybe just a diversion. Because Walt Disney, for example, they're employing artists, and us artists, I would say artists from fine art, we say, yeah, they're just designers. The artists working for Walt Disney or Netflix or these big firms. And they have a big impact with their image. They are changing the way we see society. For example, the Marvels is bought by Walt Disney. If you take the speech about the idea behind Marvels, or the other one is Batman and so
DC.
DC, yeah.
DC.
So if you take, I tried to take the speech, like the introduction behind the introduction at the start of the cartoon, and they say the bad people, we have to put an end to the bad people before they kill us. And I took this speech, and I took the images. I didn't publish anything. The images of what is going on in Ukraine. And it's perfectly matching with a Russian, like you put a bad person and then the images are if you're replacing Russian with the Joker or the bad people, it works perfectly. Like it's black and white and you have to stop it, it's a duty. And so you have these big firms, they are carrying a strong image, a strong message, a strong statement with highly qualified, technically the best people making images. And now they can even produce more because they are using AI. And us, because I'm including myself in it because I'm producing images, even if I'm not telling myself as an artist. We are going like, okay, we have a drive, we do our things, and so it makes me, this is a bit my struggle today. I don't know how you would think about it, if it's too much, or if you should continue to be alone and or connect a little and work with these people, or try to, is it possible to change the idea of the artist and try to carry a message with a strong, with skill in image, and to try to actually change the things how they are, like the big firms are doing. I don't know if I'm very clear about that, but this is my struggle today.
Big question.
I am interested in, for example, the idea of Disney. You know, like I've read a lot about him, and he was an artist, but he wasn't apparently a very good artist. And to watch his path, that he was very interested in architecture and utopias, and this whole idea of, you know, not only animation, but he was trying to create communities, and that's what, you know, he was designing a city. It's really interesting. I mean, I think some of his ideas were very bad. You know, he was very autocratic, and he was not about democracy at all. But it's interesting, like what he did and and his legacy, what it has been turned into. It's sort of amazing and scary. But he was an artist to start. And he makes this huge corporation that is controlling millions of, you know, I don't know, millions of people, the way they, you know, the way Disney has become this huge entertainment corporation. Sort of stunning that it came from an artist.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's odd.
I don't know. I think there is a conflict of narratives. Like one side, artists, unsuccessful artists, let's say the 99% of the artists, financially or impactfully unsuccessful. The narrative is like they are more rebellious, they are thinking outside of the box, they are not leaning to societal values that much. So I think there is so much moral implications involved. I don't think artists thinks they are ultra individualist, but now, especially increasing with social media, everybody has this a bit of delusion of expose
Impact.
Maybe people are more into marketing and normalizing being an artist as a job. then nobody thinks of uniting. Like in the past, at least it was more accepted that artists create generations of visual languages, or we all know deep down, like without supporting each other, without community, nobody can be also successful. But also many of the people, regarding their artist or not, they don't know giving or take. As you said, everyone just wants to take. But at the same time, it's like hard for me admire like Disney artists. They are all together. They are almost building our visual expansion. But I don't know if I want. It's not aspirational. It's not just because they cannot watermark their name, or we don't know who is the artist. It is not their choice. It's I know there are bad labor practices. I know that they don't have creative freedom. I know there's no democracy going on. Like, it is not like artists gathering their own community and producing there without hierarchy. There's a factory and they are just producing what they need to produce. Also, because like then Gucci has an impact on our street style, and we are subconsciously impacted by. But I don't mind if the Gucci workers they are fashion designer or not. Like, it's just what an individual artist motivation is mostly very different. So what I'm trying to say is not a matter of respect, but just a different way of practicing.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Esra. And I think, say, looking at Disney and also artists as being individuals, and you could say, I think it's very idealistic to want to bring together a community of artists when really possibly the only thing that unites them might be that they are artists. They're all very different in their own individualism. However, I really think that there is something to be gained from having collectives of artists working together if they can find something that unites them. I think, say, the example of Disney or the other examples that you also gave, Esra, it tends to be one strong, charismatic leader that sets the tone. And if, for example, say Disney, Anna, when you were talking about there, Disney, he had a vision, a drive, and he brought together artists all working under the Disney vision. And it's obviously proved to be very, very successful. But can you define that as a true community of people who are united in their beliefs? I would nearly argue that no, they're all very, very talented individuals, but they're under the umbrella of a viewpoint or an ethos of someone else. And let's say, for the example, Frank Lloyd Wright, out in the Arizona desert, hugely successful, had a following, a huge following, and actually still has a following and worldwide appeal. But what he did was bringing together a community of architects, and then his wife was obviously a very charismatic person in her own right, and she brought together artists and very, very creative people. But again, it's the Frank Lloyd Wright vision. You know, it's not a true community, even though they themselves would probably define themselves as a community or a collective. But again, I would make the argument that they're not being true to themselves. They're under the charisma of a very, very charismatic leader. And that's not a bad thing. And in that, obviously, there's a lot of success to be gained from that. And maybe this is what unsuccessful artists should look for, a leader who can bring them together with other people and be very, very successful.
I think I agree with what Anna is saying. I think it really depends on the personality. Like, not everyone who is an artist is suitable for this, kind of independent life. Because being an artist, you kind of are very independent. You need to kind of do your own thing. But there are some really good artists out there that are more suitable to be under someone's umbrella, and like Disney or Steve Jobs, let's say, and maybe their talent is best suited when there's a strong figure in the leadership and would really bring out their talents within the corporations or whatever. But for me, what makes a community really, because I think, when Anna and Esra was talking, I kept thinking about some older style artists where it's more about like the ego, it's more about like the image, or at least that's how I perceive them. Maybe that's not what they are about, but like I used to perceive like older artists as like, oh, this big personality ego, like Picasso, and then everybody kind of like revolve around them. Like he's kind of like the planet, and then everyone's just like the moon, and just going around them. That I don't think that's the case for our generation or this era right now. Like if you're being very personality, like if you have a huge personality, aka if you're being an asshole, like I felt like people are not really willing to work with you because you're being such an asshole. But I'm not sure whether it is like a gender thing. Sometimes I felt like, being a man, if you're an asshole, people give you a pass sometimes.
It made me think of a huge paradox, like artists who work collectively tells the stories that creates individualism in the society. Like most of Disney heroes are like really what they are teaching, what they are telling to us. But artists who work individually constantly talk about community and society and common subjects. So yeah, maybe there is a big gap in the way of how to say subject matter and the execution.
So let me ask the question. What do you guys find in a community that most attract you? And what do you want to get from a community or give to a community? That's just a question. I don't have an answer. Just leave it on the table.
You mean artist community, or
like
through your art you wanna access a community, or you wanna bring a message that comes from community?
Either way, it's either the message you're able to brought out through your art, or maybe it's completely unrelated to your art.
I can answer something. I don't know if this is exactly what you're looking for, but I'm involved with currently several different groups of artist communities. And there's some that I'm a bit player. I'm just going to be supportive. Like there has to be a leader in a community. It just can't fall apart. So either I'm functioning as support, I'm going to be part of this community. I'm going to contribute where I can. Or there's a couple places where I'm the lead and I need people. I'm a soft leader, but I still am the leader. And if I ask people to help me, then I'm hoping that they will, so I decide with each community, what's my position here? How does it best affect me? And how does it best affect the whole? Am I leading or am I a supporter? So I just decide, like, that sort of stuff. And sometimes I join a community and then I realize no one's leading this. This is a good thing. I have to lead. So, yeah.
So what does that sense like, because you're Anna, it seems like you're fine being a leader or a supporter, which is great. But what is that you're looking for in each of these communities?
Because for me, being an individual artist in my studio, because I'm an introvert, it's very isolating. It doesn't make me happy. It just is not enough. So I have to know that working in community is what makes me complete as an artist. So yes, I have those times where I'm by myself. I'm making work. I'm, doing my own individual, egotistical, I'm in charge, but I have to be able to go out and go to the city council meeting, become an arts leader, do my miniature golf thing, become, in collective of these other artists. And I do think there's a lot of people, I think it's also because women were so much more collective.
Mhm.
They realize, oh, we need groups, we need support. And even if we only meet once a quarter, or it's on a Zoom, or it's like this Zoom thing is a community, that is run by you guys in Spain. And so it's so nice that you guys have done that. And like, I want to be a support member for you guys, because what you're
Same.
doing is making really interesting conversations that make me think about stuff. So yeah, that's what it just gives me.
Totally.
One thing is
Yes.
in the story of group of artists, community of artists or collectives, there were community or collectives with maybe where there was a figure, a face, and was not necessarily the leader. So you have a personality, and then you have the one pulling the strings. And many times, so there's the École de Nice, the School of Nice, my city in France, where I did the fine art school. All the artists were strong individualities, but things were going well. And there was not really one leader, and everybody was differently successful, but they were all successful and they were helping each other, and they created a movement by the name of a school of Nice, because money was flowing and the success was there, and things were going on. So, and in the case of what we try to do with the community here is there's not really a leader. Like I'm more like strategical thinking, and more is a face. Like she's so much that she's doing 30 things in time, so there's no way to control or to. So she's the face, but there's a strategy, but there's no leadership. Like I'm not telling you what to do. I just organize, and that's all. So I think to come back to this is the problem, is when we think we're individual, we think it's individualism. So when it's individualistic, it's starting from John Locke in the idea of individualism and the society, I don't have it's liberalism. It's the start of the liberal thinking, and then you can be a strong individual with not really so much individualistic. So there's something that is not very clear with artists. They think, I think it's a bias. They think that they must be selfish, introverted, or introverted. Maybe it's not a choice, but who knows if it's a choice or if it's a box the society put us in with habit, and we say, oh, they are introverts, so with time they become, and all of that is just narratives, because most of the artists in the past who are successful and they claim to be introvert, they were not. So yeah, the thing is, that's for sure, there's who have two eyes, who have one nose, who have two ears. When we see a community, we see one person. We cannot change that. So every time we need to simplify, and there's one person and any group or like Apple, we see Steve Jobs or the next one. That's normal because we are very simple-minded and we have a reception. The reception is very simple, and we cannot embrace the whole idea of a complex organism. We have to simplify. But then that's why artists. That's why when there are a group of creators, a group of workers, there's one person showing. And that's why we need leaders also for organizing. But I tend to think that everybody can be equally successful in a community. It's not something that the leader has to be the most successful or the most impactful.
Yeah, I would just, I'm not sure. I go back to architecture on this one because I just go back to, I was a site architect for a year on a very large project, and ultimately someone in that scenario needs to make the decision, and someone needs to herd the group and pull them together, especially a design team, and someone has to be at the front to make that final decision. But collectively there shouldn't be any real hierarchy. There should be, everybody's voice should be heard, and then ultimately someone has to make the final decision, right or wrong, and live by that. But I find it hard from an art point of view, because you talk about introverted, like I'm not an extrovert, but I'm definitely not an introvert. I just have my own character. Sometimes I like to be outside. Sometimes I like to be, inside and in my own thought. I think most people or most artists could be like that. But I've been struggling with this thing about self and trying to put my arms around, what self is. And I always go back to the Ayn Rand, the Fountainhead book, where Howard Roark in is it's all about self and being true to your one idea, that otherwise when you come into this collective community, and the idea can get tarnished if it's not held onto. And I found that with architecture, with business partners, sometimes it's egotistical kind of alpha male or even strong characters take, and you kind of fight for their idea a bit more, and something happens to ideas, they get watered down. So I've been struggling for the last while with that kind of self, and that's where the community, I'm really trying to, and it's going back to the question, what does the community mean to me? I want to put myself out of a comfort zone where I listen to a community rather than kind of just listening to my own head all the time, that's kind of inner monologue, because you can kind of convince yourself that you're right all the time, but what's right, what's wrong, I don't know,
Right.
I don't know.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Oh, like the writers.
Can I politicize for a moment this discussion, because I cannot just not think about. I feel like we a bit disregard capitalism from the equation. I don't feel like I'm in the same community of my design team and with my boss, and I don't think Steve Jobs is a community member. Like there is zero, like the amount of income diverse a lot, so there is no same sense of community. Instead, in artist community per se is rebellious, or like it doesn't work with capital individualist norms. It is non-profit by its nature. You can make money, but it is kind of meant to be, to me, like idea of giving.
Yeah, with the architecture thing, Esra, once you attach money and commercial kind of, like if you're on a project and it's 100 million and someone has to, and there's contractual elements to it, someone has to be the team leader, someone has to be the lead, and it's normally the architect or is the lead on it. So someone has to make those decisions. So when I say, but a good architect or a good leader, if that's what you want to call it, a good lead will listen to all the points and make the decision, because someone has to make a decision. Otherwise it would be just, nothing no decisions get made. So one of my architectural mentors always said, make a decision, it's right or wrong, but it's a decision, and then move forward. You're moving forward all the time. And in architecture, like there's always a hierarchy of decision making, and in design teams with art, you're right, everybody in theory, once you remove the money from it, it kind of becomes a level playing ground. But unfortunately, it's a commercial entity unless you're in a research-based kind of architectural practice.
Yeah, unfortunately, money is unremovable from the practice, and at least what I'm seeing in many years, just so not aligned with the amount of money people are making, doesn't match with necessarily with their decision-making process or responsibility process. Most of the time, decision is done by a team. Everything is done by a team, and somebody just makes the money because they have better connections. They have capacity to make the business. They know clients, which old rich Italian man, and you do all the work, you do all the decision, you take all the almost responsibility, you even sign. So somebody dies in construction site, I will go to jail most probably, and then I don't have any profit margin of that. So
again, going back to that architecture thing, the risk reward is unbalanced. It's one of those professions that's risk reward. So the reward is money, and the risk is
Huge.
what you say, going to jail for making a wrong decision. Yeah, and they just do not. It's an unbalanced scale. It's one of the reasons why I left architecture.
That's why it is not a community. Like
I think that's not only true.
sectors.
I think that's not only true in architecture. That's true in all kinds of business. If you're the business owner, you always have bigger risk, but you have a bigger chance of reward. And if you're just an employee, you're very safe, so to say, but your risk is lower and your rewards are lower too.
Isn't it a liberal narrative, like as if like justifying that huge profit? There is a huge risk people are taking. Yes, but how they could afford to first risk? Like I really cannot start.
Well, you said it already. They came from rich and they have money.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you an example. One of my ex-boss, like one of the company I worked with, he lives in one of the richest neighborhood in Vancouver. Like everyone has like big mansions, and he started his business during high school. He was going around his neighborhood putting up Christmas lights for his rich client, and he would not take any client that would not pay under $3,000, $3,000 US, let's say. So anyone that is under $3,000 is not his client list. So think about that. You have to have neighbors with big houses willing to just like throw the $3,000 like this out of the window, like this. I mean, like what kind of family is that? Think about it. I certainly don't have $3,000 to throw out of the window just like this, right?
Yeah, totally. That's why I just don't like appreciating anything about them. Like I don't like this as if risk taking is based on courage or something like that.
Yeah,
like it's just
come back
it's
to that.
Unfortunate. Yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Going back to the light and throwing $3,000 out the window or whatever. I suppose what do we learn from that from an art point of view? Like what message is in there? Is it that you go after a certain audience? Like that's what he's done. He's gone after an audience and he's put a benchmark on his worth.
You have to find your pond. You have to find your pond. You have to find your pond to swim in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's lessons to be learned from that experience,
Right.
and you might choose to say, well, actually, I'm going to do the $1 print and give it to the mass.
Exactly. You can
Yeah,
say,
or
you can say, my client cannot, I mean, neighborhood I live in cannot afford $3,000. What about 300?
yeah. Again, I go back to what lesson is there? Because if that guy was knocking on the door with lights for $10, they probably wouldn't value it because they're in a
No.
neighborhood where they don't value that. And a friend of mine said to me, you know, if you're trying to sell art to a person in, say, a New York loft, and they're not going to buy art that's €500 or
Yeah.
$5,000. They want art that's $100,000 because it represents the value of the loft being a 10 million. So they want something that's, you know, 5 million. So there is a representation, and that's the lesson in that. So it's kind of you know, look for audience. If it's financially, if you're trying to get finance out of it, you need to find your audience.
Yeah.
Or you go to the masses, you do the Banksy thing where you're selling, you know, prints for €25, £25, and then the secondary market is selling them, you know, buying them and right away on eBay, which is horrible. The artist is.
You need to go.
I have to leave, yes.
Yeah, I do too. Really interesting conversation.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I also have to leave in 10 minutes, but I'll stay for another 10 minutes. Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye, Anna.
Bye. Great talk.
I also have to leave in 10 minutes, but I'll stay for another 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I may.
I want to continue what Pigsy, right? Oh, Ciaran. I want to continue what you were saying because I recently had a learning similar to what you were saying. So recently I went to a education workshops for 2 weeks in Asia. And for 2 weeks, we have two different teachers. First week, we get one teacher, and second week, we get a second teacher. The two teachers, their qualifications were quite similar, but the personality is like this. So the first teacher, you know, she dressed really nice and she has a really good demeanor. She's social with people really well. And like, you know, whatever you say to her, she would like, you know, answer in a very polite manner or like in a very professional manner. And then the second teacher is more like a traditional artist personality where she's like, hey, like that. And even though personally I love the work by the second teacher much more the first teacher, but if I have an exhibition opportunity coming, if I have to hire one of them, I'll also hire the first one because she's nicer to deal with. So that really taught me big lessons because I was like, wow, like first of all, you know, personality matters, like how social you are, how well you work with people really matters. Second of all is that like you really in important situation or like in important settings, you have to like dress really nice, like not really nice, at least you have to like clean yourself and be like presentable, so that like, you know, I mean, not in t-shirts and, you know, like pants and jeans, right? At least like in openings, or I try to dress nicer so that people leave a good impression on you, because I realize that I'm affected by first impression too. Like I have my own judgment and I am affected by that. And the third learning I had was that I was thinking, like what you were saying, you know, if you are like a millionaire and you have like a big mansion, and now you're thinking about, okay, I'm gonna put a piece of painting on my wall, and there's these two teachers in front of you. Which one would you pick? I think I would pick the first one because when I look at her painting, at least I remember the artist being really nice and having a really good conversation with her. Versus the second one was like really grumpy and like kind of not nice to deal with. So I think like personality and like being able to present yourself, it's really important sometimes, all the time.
Yeah, so just from my experience with that, and I 100% hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
My mindset's kind of slightly altering, and it jumps back and forth over my lifetime. But sometimes your own biases, because of the personality, can stop you actually picking the right person for the job. Because the other that's a bit grumpier could be extremely good at actually telling
for
you
the job.
here.
Yeah.
Even though she's difficult to deal with or he's difficult to deal with, whatever, they could be saying the message rather than telling you what you want to hear, actually help you
100%.
Yeah. So even though one is presented, so you need to really remove all your, for myself, I'm kind of speaking to myself here, you need to remove all your preconceived ideas of what something is, and then come to your decision about who is the best for that one project, because one person could be good for one project, but not the next time you do it.
Totally, totally.
Yeah. And that's what I think, but it's a really hard thing to do because we all we had this thing in the architectural practice. You won or lost a client within 5 seconds of them walking through the door.
Yeah.
So the door had to be the right color. The hallway had to be, the entranceway had to look a certain way. And a lot of it's bullshit. Like a lot of it's actually, it's superficial.
I want to ask you, do you have any tips on like, because you were saying like removing the fuss on the top and really seeing the core of a person, whether he or she fits the job or not? Do you have any personal experience of doing that? Like, how do you see through people, basically?
The way I do it these days, and I'm not sure if it's right or wrong, is whatever my instinct is, I challenge it. So my instinct could be, oh, that person looks better than the other person, so they have to be better at that job. So I actually say, stop, think about that, and actually remove whatever that thought is and see, is that actually the case? But it's really hard because you normally go for your instinct all the time. So it's very hard to pause. But and each scenario is different. I'm not sure if I have the answer, because if I did, I'd be probably I probably wouldn't make mistakes ever. So and some of the thing is making that mistake, like I've done, like, say, curators, especially if you're doing a show. Like I've a guy that has curated and helped me curate a couple of shows, but he's lazy. He's ultimately kind of has a lazy personality, but he's extremely good at actually telling you, removing and challenging and, telling you what you kind of don't want to hear. Because say a piece of artwork, you want to put it in a certain position, just because you like it, or something you don't want it in the show because you don't like it, he challenges that and basically says why, asks you why. And Greg actually does that as well. He asks you, he kind of picks at
he asks the tough question.
Yeah. So I don't know really the answer. I think it's a search, but what I would say is, pick the right person for the job and whatever, I wouldn't let clothes do it for me anymore. Like, especially coming from an architectural background, clothes and the way
I think that's true, but like, that being said, I still wouldn't want to be, because you said it, like, architecture is all about your first impression. It's about getting color right, the beams right, the whatever, the paper right, the feelings of the paper right. But I still wouldn't want to. That's just a lesson I took away from my workshop, is that I don't want to be filtered out just because of these first impression.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So like,
and I think although it is a first impression, there is some depth to it. So let's say, for example, clothes. The clothes are indicative of someone has put some work in behind the scenes. They didn't just get up and throw what was on the chair beside the bed.
Totally, yeah.
They thought, well, hang on a second, this particular event calls for this thing. And so there is a bit of depth. So it's I suppose it's not just having, again, a bias, maybe, that you always pick someone who wears designer clothing and that's just it. It's a thing. But in that, obviously a difference between someone wearing a designer outfit, or a well thought out outfit for.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
I think again,
sometimes I think you have to, like, and I can only speak for myself. You're trying to see if someone's hiding behind the clothes. Sometimes you have, like, I've met some of the most creative, inspirational, and brilliant architects who dress shit, and they don't hide behind clothes. But do you want them to represent you in certain situations because they won't dress the right way? No, you don't. So you make that decision. But I've also met guys or people that have dressed really well, but they're hiding. That's a layer to hide, to pretend that they actually know what they're talking about.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that comes with life experience, trying to, you know, sniff out the bullshit, basically.
Yeah. Try to detect people's bullshit, basically.
I know you've only got 10 minutes, but I'm interested. So you were in China. I'm interested.
No, in Vancouver.
No, not you at that convention was China, was it?
Oh, it was. If you
The
consider
tea-
Taiwan as China, then yeah, okay. Yeah, I was in Taiwan. Yeah.
The mental difference between like, so as an Irish person, I always think we're always kind of, so art in general, artists generally don't like to charge for their work, you know, but is it a different mentality with a Chinese kind of, is it Asia, is it more kind of money orientated, or they value the work? Or
You know what? I have a really Western background. So I've been here for like 20 years. I've been in North America for 20 years. So I mean, even though I speak fluent Chinese, you know, like, so I didn't arrive here until I was, you know, teenage. So from I think so, and I can only solely talk about the Hong Kong perspective, which Hong Kong is a really big hub for art because I'm from Hong Kong. So I went back to Hong Kong a month ago and was talking around with people. And I think, you know, I used to think that there is a bigger conversation about art and design in America, and there is, right? But I think there's more hot money in Asia, and when there's more hot money in Asia. And I felt like when there's more hot money, there's a bigger conversations about art, and because when you're able to afford it, you can have the conversations.
yeah.
So especially in architecture and design, because I have friends who work as interior architect, like they design the most lavish shopping malls in Asia, and compared to shopping mall here in North America, you know, like it's nothing here. So like actually an Indian architect lady was just telling me that she's able to have much bigger design conversations, like purely about forms and aesthetic and, you know, design elements and colors in Singapore than here, just because there's more hot money in Singapore. So I think for my experience in Hong Kong, which is only a week, is that yes, there's a I would say there's a 30% of conversation really about art, but 70% of it it's still about money.
Yeah.
And it really depends on where you go, because I had a really good friend who brought me to really good galleries and places, and we had good conversation about art. But there's, you know, people I met at the occasion where they're still talking about, oh, you know how like the art market is really bad this year. Oh, so and so didn't sell well because the art is not very good. Like the technique is not there. So is this a conversation about art, or is this a conversation about money, would you say?
Yeah.
It's both, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's hard to tell which is which.
Yeah, but kind of money there probably dictates the conversation, because they don't value it as much because technique's not there if they're putting a value on the technique, I suppose.
Yeah.
Or what they consider as good or bad.
Right.
Yeah. Like I always find that it just with you know, artists in Spain, a couple of my buddies, everything comes back to bloody money, you know, and you try and sit down with them and you're talking, but I can't afford the rent, I can't afford food. Like, you know, it does kind of tarnish the creative aspect.
Well, there's the joke going that like when bankers go together, they talk about art. When artists go together, they talk about money.
Yeah.
And it's true.
Yeah.
All right, I have to go, but Pigsy, have you had the chance to talk to Mo, right?
Yeah.
But I think that
Alright.
question that you just asked me would be a really good question to ask Mo, because Mo probably has a really different perspective in the China market. The China market is a bit different than the Hong Kong market that I had 1 week experience with. So maybe, you know, if you want to get to know the Asian market a bit better, Mo would be a really good.
Next talk, she will be there.
I'm kind of more, absolutely. I'm kind of interested in the psychology of it more than the actual
if I may, there's a book from a French philosopher called François Julien, with two R, Julien, with two R, not one R. And is one of the only philosophers who lived in China and speak Chinese fluently.
Oh, I think I've read his book before. Yeah.
Is Thinking from the Outside. Pensée d'un dehors. I think it's Thinking from the Outside, the title. So François Julien, and you read that book, it would change everything you think. Otherwise, there's a book called, I have it here. Very interesting book. This one is
Art History Global.
Yeah, no. So this is a spoiler. This is from James Elkins with a K.